But look, thank you very much for talking to me. I really appreciate this.
Not a problem at all. It's a
Look,
pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
No, it's a new world we live in, and I'm doing a lot of education for clients online.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer in educating the clients. Our industry, I met you 10 years ago, Haydn, and you did something to me. You were profound to me because I'd always been taught, 2 feet to compete. Like horses have 2 pairs, and the first thing you said was they've got 4 feet, not 2 pairs. And it's been profound for me for the rest of my career, like for the last 11 years for my career, because I was like, you don't have to treat the same foot. We had so many issues, and I think back and I saw it was profound. So the reason for asking you along was because our sport has grown. So 10 years ago, when you first arrived, performance industry was probably what the UK was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But in that time, we're rapidly approaching. Now, like before 10 years ago, if you had an imported horse from Europe, it was a rarity, like it was a scarcity. It was like, now they're not dime a dozen, but they're more common, and the breeding's improved like it has in the UK. And you're getting these warm bloods feet are completely different to a thoroughbred. A thoroughbred foot is in some ways quite easy to view an image and think about because they're mostly flat. Like, let's be honest, you're dealing with a flat-footed horse.
Absolutely.
Whereas the warm blood is such a different horse, and the expectations of the horse is so high now. And so the reason for asking you is because you've done amazing stuff with Team GB. Like, you guys have your whole team approach, because I know you're part of the spanner of the team, the cog in the wheel. And so what I wanted to talk to you about was what your approach to these warm bloods are, how you manage them the best way to maximize potential, because we all get so scared. Lameness is a big thing. We're obsessed with Farrier, balance, how you're balancing them. And I've listened to some podcasts you've talked about, I know you're not a big fan of showing to an x-ray. That's not a big thing. So I just really wanted the opportunity to, how do you assess horses? What's your routine for assessment? So say I present to you a new horse, what's your approach to these here? How do you manage? How do you assess them?
To be honest with you, it's multifactorial. I will use any evidence that is there, both visual and diagnostic. The thing for me, my foundation, my default position is always one of dynamics, because it's interesting that you say, that I'm not a big fan of shoeing to a static radiograph. And absolutely, no, I'm not. I would struggle to know how to shoe a horse with a static X-ray without seeing it move, because has it got a pair of feet? Is one foot completely different to the other one? And if it is, then that adds another dimension to it. So for me, the first thing is always movement, and it's always looking at the horse. It's also the holistic overview, the muscle structure. It is then once I've got that, I'm more than happy then to include things like radiographs. But the other thing for me really is about opening up and offering a proactive approach to shoeing rather than a reactive one, because I think we're all really, really good at reacting to when horses either have poor performance issues or, God forbid, they end up lame. But actually, how do you limit that? And again, it comes back down to movement. It comes back down to balance. It comes back down to making the horse as comfortable as possible. And in our world, it means that sometimes you shoe 2 feet completely differently. To give the horse that foundation.
And how do you use it? I suppose one thing how do you record that? Do you have a data system you record, or is it all in your head, or is it what way do you?
It's all in my head. No, I don't. No, I don't. I tell you that the one thing that latterly over probably the last sort of 8 years, I've done a lot more research, And there's one thing that I think more than anything else, of all the research projects that we've done, and you can statistically prove and research things and say that this, if you do this, this is what will happen. But the overriding thing of all of this, and the revolutionary thing for me, is how the horse adapts to everything that we do. So taking data is hugely beneficial for our understanding and our knowledge. When it comes down to the individual horse, it's how that horse adapts to the changes that we offer it, whether that be from veterinary, physiotherapy, or farriery. Because the one thing that we can't accommodate and we can't preempt is how that horse will adapt to the changes that we implement and to the interventions in shoeing and otherwise that we give them. And that's been certainly over the last 8 years that I think I've been even more astounded. Hence the reason why what we do now is, if I'm executing a form of change, so if we feel as though, you know, that we've looked at the horse and we feel as though a change is necessary, we use some gait analysis. I work very closely with Thilo Pau from the Royal Veterinary College, the motion and structure unit. And what we will do is, if we need to statistically measure these horses, we will take the measurements using the gait analysis system, but we will then repeat it 2 weeks later, because we never ever execute a change and then think that the changes that we've made, even if we measure it, is the end result, because it often isn't. It's that horse needs a period of adaptation to the changes and to the interventions that we've made. So we then make a second visit then 2 weeks later, and then another one either 2 weeks or a month after that, so that we can monitor the changes that these horses. And again, that has been extraordinary, to be honest, that how you see within a 10 to 14 day period how these horses completely change their balance and their gait as a result of some of the interventions that we've implemented.
So you're advising riders to change the training program in that program? Like, are you reducing exercise, or are you continuing on, or is that case dependent?
It's very much case dependent. If we're looking at pathology, then undoubtedly we will work with the trainers. So we will have again a multi-para-professional input to it, so that we can then gradually bring this horse, you know, back into work again. And you're only in the majority of cases, you're only talking very short periods of time. You know, we're looking, but for example, if I executed what I would regard as a significant change to something, then I certainly would say that for a period of 4 days that horse then was given light exercise, and then slowly work back in again. So we're only looking at short periods of time for the horse to adapt to the changes. But yes, we work with the riders, and we also work with the trainers then to say, our recommendation is that you have a program, individual program, case by case, for the introduction of the training and physiological effect that can have on the horse. Yeah.
Okay. So it is very much a case by case basis. What you're changing depends on the extent of change and stuff like that there. Yeah. Okay. With your warm, a lot of my clients obviously were scared of the foot. No foot, no horse. Foot is the biggest cause of four-limb lameness. We say, you know, and I'm sure it's no different in the UK. I'm sure you're dealing with stacks of college. Absolutely. You know,
100%.
100%. Like, if it's not a foot, I'm almost surprised, you know, a lot of the time. Yeah. How are you assess, like, if I was to say to you, I'm going to go to Europe, I'm going to go buy a horse, what changes in a foot externally would you look at and you say, you know what, I'd stay away from that? What do you think over your years of experience would you say is a certain condition?
Oh my God, that's a really good one. That's a really, really good one. Do you know what? I'm not sure that I can answer that, because we tend to end up with all, or I tend to end up with all of the things that people will say, well, I wouldn't have bought that if I were you. And you think, well, I mean, blimey. I think The difficulty in answering that question is that everybody will have a tolerance. All practitioners will look at something and say, yes, I like that, and no, I don't like that. I mean, if you take a classic example, let's take one and look at a pathology that some people will take radiographs and they'll say this horse has got unilateral side bone, and therefore I would not suggest that you do anything with this at all. We have countless horses that have unilateral side bone and never have a day's problem in their life. We have countless horses that have unilateral side bone and have serious problems. So it's very difficult when you're looking at feet to say, I would not touch that. I would not buy that if I were you. Unless it is blindingly obvious because I think, let's just go back a stage when you're looking at hoof capsules for a moment, because I think that's the bit that you're concentrating on at the moment. When you look at a hoof capsule, let's remember that a hoof capsule has the ability to bend, flex, and develop in any particular direction, subject to the pressures that are placed on it. Now, that pressure may be because of conformation, so it may be turning out, turning in, may have more compression on the inside or the outside, and the foot will alter shape as a result of it. Is it controllable? Yes, it is controllable through trimming and through shoeing protocol. So you give the horse to create the platform that it needs. But then you come across a horse then that is completely deformed. You have a hoof capsule that is really deformed. And if you then start to think and start to group those horses and think about very severe sheared heels as a classic example, you will not return that foot to normality. The only thing that you can do is try to even the pressures that are placed through that hoof capsule as much as you can. So if I was to hedge my bets, I would say, as an example, when you're looking at horses with very severe sheared heels and very, very atrophied as a result of it, it's sheared, it's gone up, but then it's atrophied, so it's upright on the one side and it's flared on the other. Those are the sort of horses that you need to be careful with. But it's not the hoof capsule. It's because the hoof capsule has this ability to be able to compensate for that. What happens then, of course, is that the loading parameters that are associated with a foot like that means that the joint loading is equally affected on the balance of probability. And that's the bit that catches up with these horses, the repetitive strain injury of uneven loading through those joints over a period of time. That's much more difficult to be able to compensate for.
So is there, like, the hoof capsule is an amazing structure, it can adapt, it can change. Is there a certain level or age of a horse that you just say, you know what, this horse is signed? It's, you know, the prime example is you buy the 3-year-old warm blood that's got a slightly upright foot or slightly deformed hoof capsule. I often view, and I don't know, but you can disagree whether a 3-year-old, it's quite easy to start working with that horse and you think you've got another 15 years of life. But when you're presented with the 12-year-old Grand Prix dressage horse, what's your approach like when you look at it and you think, oh God, that's terrible, you know? Like, let's be honest, we look at it and we think, oh, that's a terrible foot, it's not functioning properly, but the horse is sound and performing well. What's your approach on those?
Strictly a fantastic question. It's shoeing for comfort, because there comes a period where you then become a caretaker. Because if the horse has coped with the deviations and the conformation that it has, once it gets to its mature years of 12, 13, 14 and upwards, you then adopt, or I adopt, more of a shoeing for comfort. So it's trying to keep that horse as comfortable as possible. And that's always a good one, isn't it? Because with the greatest respect, we live in a world where there's somebody else will come along and they'll look at something and they'll go, well, I'm not so sure I'd have done it like that. And I think when you know your horses, when you know, we're lucky enough that we do see these horses, regularly every month, every 5 weeks. You know the tolerances of which these older horses can cope with slightly adjusting their balance, and what they can cope with and what they can't. So it becomes strictly shoeing for comfort, and whatever makes that horse comfortable to do its job.
I think it's interesting how you see changes. Like I don't know how the UK is now. It's been a long time since I sort of looked at horses in the UK, but the European horse coming out here is a very upright, boxy foot, which I think has got to be environmental. You know, paddock turnout is not a big thing in mainland Europe.
Yeah.
I know it's probably, I think one of your main clients, Carl, is probably a big proponent of that, you know, and that's becoming more common. But out here, we have a lot of horses that grow up in big paddocks.
Yep.
So even the same pedigree, and I've seen horses, you know, pictures of horses' feet from Europe. They're, you know, the mares have been imported and then they've bred in Australia and they've had the full run. And you've got two different feet.
Yes,
like
completely.
Like, because we get more lower heels where you get the European. What's your approach to those European horses? Because I assume you're saying them more regular than we are. Even they're coming across the English Channel all the time. Like, do you see adaptations over time, or do you just accept that's the foot and I just trim it for comfort, or what's your approach?
Oh, I think you've answered the question. I mean, and by your description, and another example of that, some of the European horses, because in Europe, a lot of these warm bloods are almost sort of farmed, for the want of a better description, but they're kept in big barns. So, you know, unlike even in the UK, you'll find that these young horses are kept in big barns. They're on deep litter, and they'll have 20, 30 horses all in huge big barns on deep litter. The feet are affected as a result of that. So we tend to get a lot of warm blood horses that come over, and actually they're not always, you know, upright. A lot of them are wider than they are longer. Their foot adapts to the environment that they're in, and equally, the minute that you change that environment, the feet will adapt to that environment. And I think it's about accepting and understanding that they are likely to change, and then changing your shoeing protocol and accommodating that change over a period of time. But these feet will change. Their feet will change dramatically, with different husbandry and different care. Road work is quite a big thing in the UK. You know, on tarmac, hard surfaces. So a lot of people do a lot of road work. You know, the feet will change as a result of that. But you know, that's what shoeing is about, isn't it? It's about, you know, every time I don't know about you, but you know, when I look at these feet, even the horses that I've shod for a long period of time, you know, you'll see some change, and something will. And you'll adapt your shoeing protocol to it. Nothing big, just a little extra millimeter here or an extra millimeter there, or the trimming is slightly different. But the structure is living, it's moving, and it's adapting all the time. We have terrible trouble at the moment, actually, because we've gone through one of the worst, wettest winters that we've had on record. Unprecedented, month after month after month after month. Then all of a sudden, it dries up. We've got feet that are falling apart at the moment because the ground has got so hard, and these feet are just being completely absorbed of moisture. And it's a bit like a leather boot. You know, you go into horses, then all of a sudden you're seeing feet that are starting to crack, and because they're turned out, and they're changing, they're adapting to the environment that they're in.
Yeah, it's funny. We had a summer, the last summer we've been through, we didn't really have a proper summer, as we would call it. So we didn't have, like, as much as we had bushfires and stuff like that there, we had a drought leading into it, but we didn't have proper heat. And we had so many horses with just thin soles, you know, horses that on X-ray usually used to have, you know, 20 millimeters, 25 millimeters of sole depth.
Yeah.
Now down to 8, 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's, you know, we had more regular rain, but I don't know what happened. All the soles just exfoliated themselves,
yes.
you know.
Yeah.
And like at one farrier, every time I ring him, he said, "What, another set of leather pads?" And I was like, "Yeah." He says, and we were having to just use it because and usually we put leather pads on, to be honest, January, February, when we're burnt to crisp. You know, we don't have green grass. We still have green grass in February, which is unusual for us. It's usually burnt off. It's fascinating to see that you say, you've got wet and then you go to dry and it's just like, it's like the feet just can't cope with it.
And horses can cope with a constant, can't they? I mean, if it's really, really arid and dry, if you look at the feet, they're solid, and they can, and equally horses that are in moist, wet conditions permanently, they will, yes, the foot will become more mobile, but actually it's not a big problem. It's this constant shift that when you go from wet to dry, dry to wet, and that's what they tend to struggle with, really.
Yeah, it's a change. Like they really do adapt, and they get going, and you think, oh God, here we go again. Hardness, we have to be proactive almost, because we know what's going to happen when we get dry. Like it goes rock hard. It's like you talk about, we don't do road work. It's not very common in Australia to do road work on horses.
Yeah.
It would be less than 1% of the population would do road work. But they're out in paddocks and they're rock hard. They're like bitumen.
Yes, exactly.
So
absolutely,
it's different. It's not bitumen. It's technically grass. But
I know, but it's rock hard. Yeah,
it's you don't dig posts in the middle of summer. Like that. You'd be mad to do that there. It's a strange situation. How you're doing? I wanted to sort of touch back. I listened to a podcast. You talked about your dressage horses and your high performance work, and obviously you work with some very high profile horses, had great results. You talked about looking at horses' movements in the Grand Prix test, for example. You talked about pirouettes and stuff like that there. Is that, with your team, was that come about from your team discussion about really pulling every performance apart? Is that just the ultimate high level Team GB approach to how you improved horses? Is that what you guys did, or was it just, how did you guys approach that? How was it sort of identified?
What we do is we have a multi-practice approach to it. So each person or each sector will be seeing the same thing. So we'll have the saddler. We'll be looking to see what's happening from a saddlery point of view. The vet will be looking at it. The physio will be looking at it, and the farrier will be looking at it. But then we break it down into our own department. Then, so for me, when I'm looking at performance, I'm looking at dressage at a high level. I'm looking at a number of things, and not necessarily the feet, I might add, because then this is where your dynamics come into play. So I'm looking at individual lever arms, i.e. the limbs. I'm looking at their position. I'm looking to see where the body is in relation to that, in conjunction with its conformation, especially on the hind limb. I'm looking to see what the loading parameters are for the movements as well. Because as you will know, it affects that different things can affect not only the swing or the flight phase, but actually the stance phase. Massively important. Something that's been overlooked, I think, in farriery is how farriery can affect the stance phase of these high performance horses. So the time of which that foot is engaged with the ground. Why is that important? Well, if you take a pirouette, for example, a pirouette to the left, pirouette to the right, you're expecting 650 kilos plus, with some of these bigger horses, 750 kilos, to rotate on one limb. If it's going to rotate on that limb, the limb needs to be in the right position, number one. So the point of ground contact relative to that movement is absolutely crucial. So if you've got a horse that has a hind limb rotation, let's say take cow hop, for example, and the left is cow hop slightly more than the right, it means that it's going to affect the swing phase. When it affects the swing phase, the aerial phase, it can also mean that it comes underneath the center of the mass of the body, center of mass, a little bit too far. So now you've got a lever arm that essentially is leaning. Now you're expecting the horse to rotate on that, to sit back and rotate on that lever arm. But the lever arm is in the wrong position. It's in the wrong position because of its conformation, maybe in the pelvis, maybe somewhere else, maybe in the hock. So what you can do then is you then can apply a shoeing methodology that accepts the horse's conformation, because we don't want to change that. That's how the horse loads, how the horse is made. But what we want to affect is the loading parameters through the limb. What that equates to in terms from a rider's perspective is power output. So if you have a lever arm that is more upright, and you then can increase the push, so you have more push off, you have more power. If the lever arm is angled when it comes into contact with the ground, and then when the horse sits backwards and rotates on it, it means you have less power output. So by adapting to the shoeing and creating a platform that accommodates it, but you don't try to do anything about it, merely means that horse now has more power. And it's one of the things that over the last sort of, 25 years, these are the sort of things that the terminology that riders would say to you. You decide to put a bit of a lateral extension on, or you decide to change the profile relative to the higher limb when you're looking at these horses move and looking at the individual joints and seeing what the hock is doing. And they'd come back and they say, oh God, this horse is so much more powerful. Well, you haven't increased the power. That's all you've done is stabilize the limb. Yeah. And that's the proactive approach to shoeing, because it's a double-edged sword, really, that if you don't do it, you have uneven loading through the joints. You have a potential then of a horse trying to compensate for that. But then you've got repetitive strain injury then that creates some of the pathology and the problems that we see later on. So for me, it's quite standard, really. You just look at something, you look at the limb, you look at the individual joints as it's being loaded, whether it be in front or behind, and you say, well, actually, I think we need to do A, B, C, D. And that's sort of how I approach that.
I know when you were last out in Australia, you were a big fan of the lateral extension. Like you were quite, I think even some of the farriers I was with were quite, they thought, wow, he's pretty brave how much extension he puts on here. Is that still something you're doing, using the lateral extension to try and stabilize those and bring those limbs out if they're getting a bit underneath them?
Yeah, when it is appropriate, then what we tend to see. It's interesting that because, and I think that's got a lot to do with the breeding as well, that if I go back, I was using lateral extensions a lot more 20 years ago than I'm using now. And I think that there are an awful lot of horses that we're seeing different horses conform differently now. I mean, there's no doubt about it, that we're not seeing the problems that we used to see. But there's always a rule of thumb here, and I still use it to this day. And in fact, we had I was looking at a horse with somebody only last week, and with another farrier, and said, look, the thing about this being brave and all of this material being stuck out the side and everything, when you're stood on top of it and you're viewing this horse directly behind it after you've created this platform, you sometimes can see an awful lot of material and you think, oh my God, that is just ridiculous. The rule of thumb, and it still works to this day, count 10 meters, put a line on the ground of 10 meters, stand a horse in front of you, walk the horse away, and I will absolutely 100% guarantee that if you've got the lateral extension in the right place, at 10 meters, it will completely disappear. And then what you will see is a limb that is loaded down onto a platform that is parallel to the dynamic limb, and not this material that you see statically when you stand above them. And it works every single time. At 10 meters, if you can still see that you've got a bit of material stuck out the side, you're way, way, way outside the curve. You've got too much material there. But it will completely and utterly just disappear. And it works on every single case between 6 and 10 meters. Yep. And it's an easy thing to do. You just look at it and you go, oh yeah, that's absolutely fine. That's so I can see those two tram lines that we've created. the outside where you've got the lateral extension is exactly the same as the inside relative to the limb. Works. It's great.
Great. Yeah. Oh, that's something I've never heard. 10 meters. So it's something, you know, because your eyes are drawn to the steel, or and you're like,
Absolutely.
You know, have I put too much on here?
A level surface between 6 and 10 meters, and 10 meters is a slight exaggeration. It will disappear after 6 to 8 meters. But I always say, you know, give people. And the other thing about it is I'm interested actually in your comment, because I've always thought that whenever I've done a clinic in over the years, and I've been abroad, I've always been quite conservative with what I've done, because I want people to take ownership of what we do. So if you show somebody something, and I very, very, very rarely show horses in a clinic abroad the same that I do at home, because when I'm at home, I'm in control of it. So I tend to expand and the envelope, push the envelope a little bit with more. So I'm interested that your point that if I scared a few people off 10 years ago, then I apologize, but actually I was being quite conservative.
Oh no, I think you did. I think you did say you were conservative, but I think that was the difference, and it's become more apparent in Australia. Most farriers will gain a lot of their income from racehorses. Yes. Racing's massive in Australia, so yes. Showing a galloper versus showing a performance horse is very different. So, you know, your galloper, you're not want to even live a millimeter out exposed. Yes. There, because they're going to get galloped on, they're going to get caught. You know, it's a completely different horse to shoe. So I think you were speaking to a lot of guys who, and we're seeing it now, like even some of my good farrier friends, they admit they shoe horses completely differently now. It's almost like two styles of farriery. One's for the gallopers, which it's tight.
Yeah.
You know, you can't leave a millimeter. You put a millimeter in the inside of a hind foot, it's going to slice itself to pieces. You know, whereas your warm blood, you can stick a centimeter out the back, as long as, you know. And I suppose one of the things we're dealing with at the minute is trying to get more length on shoes, on front shoes especially, to give more caudal support, and just nothing special in the shoe, just length to get to bring those heels back so the heels don't roll under. Well, because they live in paddocks all the time. A lot of them got to live with bell boots, as they call them in the UK, overreach boots all the time to try and stop that. But it's something a lot more common. But so when I saw you, to be honest, I think you had a room full of gallopers. So you leaving a bit of steel, like, and I do remember now you did say, oh, you know, if I was at home, I'd do a bit more. I don't want to cripple this horse. But even like the farrier I was with at the time said, wow, he's braver than I am, you know. And
but they're complete opposite ends of the spectrum, aren't they? You know, and I respect that. And to somebody, if your whole life has been used to shoeing, you know, appropriately, you know, tight and snug, and then all of a sudden you see all this, like, it's like, ooh, that's that's totally alien to me. But then if you've got the ability to be able to just move your eyes from the feet, and whether you've shot them or not for a minute, and then just go up a bit, and you look at your racehorse, and you look at this 700 kilo muscle bound athlete, you know, which is, they're both horses, complete ends of the spectrum. So you know, I think for me, common sense says that you have to apply the appropriate methodology to your shoeing, depending on what you're treating, whether it be a clinical, or whether it be, you know, just a different species and a different discipline.
Okay. Look, Haydn, thank you very much for your time. But I have one final question, and I'm going to put you on the spot. And is there something in farriery that you've seen creep in over the last 10 years, 15 years, 5 years, 2 years, that you really wish wasn't used, like a style of shoeing, or is there something that rankles you?
Double clip fronts, quarter clip fronts.
Yep. You don't like them?
Well, no. I think they are inappropriately. What we've done is we as an industry and a profession, we've been duped, And we've been duped into believing that if you talk about long toes, if you want to bring the toe back, then you fit quarter clips. By fitting quarter clips, the agreed I think process is that you then can reduce the toe. There are very, very few horses, unless you've got a very narrow warm blood foot that is long, and you use the clips actually to anchor and to get the appropriate sort of radius at the toe, but you use the clips to sort of open the foot up a little bit, so it's a narrow boxy foot. I'm in favor of those. If you're just trying to reduce the toe back, quarter clips don't work. And when somebody said to me, they said, how do you know they don't work? And we were doing a clinic, and I said, I'm the first person in this room that has used quarter clips that has not required to dress the toe back every time they've gone back there. Please stand up. Because every single time we go back to a foot with the quarter clip fronts to try to control the toe, we have to rasp the toe back and toe back and toe back. So you're not controlling the toe radius by using quarter clip fronts, and they become something of a fashion. We've been duped into believing that they work, but in the majority of cases, I'm afraid they don't. So I look at it, I go, oh God, here we go again.
All right, so I've really picked on a soapbox moment. Your side clips. So do you shoe with no clips? Is that your preference?
I will shoe with no clips. Yes, I will shoe with no clips, and I try to because again, what you're trying to do is you're trying, rather than look at the hoof capsule and let the hoof capsule, we said, bends and flexes and develops according to the pressures that's placed on it. So if you've got a long toe, a long sloping toe, it basically means that you've got more compression in the caudal aspect of the foot. So there are different things that you can do to reverse that engineering without using quarter, because quarter clips on their own do not do that. You've got to fit so that the shoe, the platform that you create is under the center of rotation of the coffin joint. By doing that, you then can relieve compression when the fetlock hyperextends in the caudal aspect of the foot. And you can use it by a standard no clips, but actually you can still use it by a toe clip, by just notching a big toe clip out there, not on your thoroughbreds, because it won't work on your thoroughbreds.
Yeah.
You'll be calling you up rather rapidly saying, can you help me get out of this mess, please? Because I just created a big problem here. But on your warm bloods, there are so many warm bloods that we used to see shod with double clip fronts unnecessarily so. Just no need whatsoever. Get the shoe to the center of rotation of the coffin joint, put a toe clip on there, you will control the radius of the toe, not by fitting double clip fronts.
Okay. It is something we see all the time. Like I'm not a big fan of toe clips, to be honest, because unless it's dressed properly, I find they run everything forward, and the other thing for me personally is wedges. I despise them.
Oh my God, don't even start on that one.
Yeah, I find, and that's some people shoeing to a static structure. You've got your palmar angle, your plantar angle, and your wedge. And as I always say, equal and opposite, like Newton's law. Everything you do to one thing, it's caused a problem elsewhere. And I see wedges and I see proximal suspensories, and that's
absolutely.
I just like here we go. Yeah. I think they're okay for a rehab process. For
100%. Yeah,
but not in workhorse. It's just my my clients. If you ask them, they'll all say Mike hates wedges. I just despise the things.
You'd be in very good company, or I would be in very good company, because I completely and utterly agree. I use very, very well. I don't use heel wedges other than for rehab. Rehab, no question. There are post surgery or injury. Definitely, no question. But it has to be very controlled and for a very specific period of time. But again, we've been through that. We don't see horses with wedges in this country like we used to, 30 years ago. Just about every jumper that was jumping had wedges on it. But again, it defies logic to me because you see, sometimes we need to let the horse tell us, and sometimes you need to stand back and just look at what you're doing. And if you're putting heel wedges on, and you've got no heel growth whatsoever, and in fact the heels are getting driven up into the digital cushion even more, it then begs the question why you're still putting heel wedges on. And again, if for me, my approach for those horses, if you've got negative palmar and then you're trying to shoot to a static radiograph, and you put the lift on, you put the heel wedge on, and you go, there you go, look at that, brilliant. We've now got 5-degree positive angle where we were negative before. The minute you then have fetlock hyperextension, when the full is at a mid stance phase, maximum load, you've then increased the pressure around the caudal aspect of the foot and not decreased it. So you've made the situation worse. So what you can do is you can actually create something different. You can take the compression away by taking the compression away by fitting things like polyurethane impression material, an external digital cushion with a thermoplastic pad. You keep the foot flat on the ground. Some of the horses that we've had in the past have had wedges on for such a long period of time that when we put the shoe on, you've actually got a gap of sometimes 4 millimeters where the shoe is level, but the foot has completely and utterly been crushed. And I just leave them alone. I fill the back part of the foot up, caudal aspect of the foot, with polyurethane putty. And a shore rated one as well, a low shore rated, so that it's nice and soft to that area. Put a polyurethane pad over the top of it, lock that foot in. You've created yourself an external digital cushion, so that when that fetlock then hyperextends, you've got absolutely zero pressure in the caudal aspect of the foot. Hey presto, the heel grows, which is exactly what you want. Yeah. And then over a period of time, you can then reverse that engineering, and slowly they come up.
Yeah, it's I'm playing someone else's. It's not just me. I thought I was losing my mind for a while. No, I'm just not a big fan. I'm just not a big fan of the wedges, and yeah, that's something I struggled with, to be honest, for a long time. I thought, yeah, why are we wedging these horses up? There's just no reason for it. I just can't, and more I end up having to deal with problems up the limb, I think.
Yes, you do. Absolutely.
I find that so many problems up the limb. I think,
yeah, and wedging horses up behind. I mean, you then get back problems. You then got hamstring problems. You've got gluteal problems. Or they're saying that the horse is behind the saddle is absolutely locked, and it's all locked because the lever arm is not working properly. Take the wedges off and get the lever arm more upright, and give it more caudal support, like you're saying. Shoe longer, and then all of a sudden, the rest then takes care of itself.
It does. But anyway, yeah. Well, we'll keep fighting the good fight on that one. Keep fighting the good fight, and eventually it'll stop. But Haydn, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. It's been fabulous, and it's been interesting again. And hopefully, I don't think it'll be this year. It'll doubt next year. We'll hopefully see you back in Australia at some stage.
Oh, I'd love to come back. We got a lot more to show you, because we've been doing a lot of work on packing, the effects of packing, both externally and internally. Horses with asymmetric feet in front, how you can completely change your horse just by packing one foot. And you talk about performance when we see these horses with asymmetric limbs. And we see what we think are horses that are lame. They're not lame. Pack one foot, all of a sudden the horse is 100% sound. And it's all to do with how the foot interacts with the surface. And again, you're looking at lever arms. There's a whole lot to tell you about.
Oh well, I think we might have to hit up with some farrier companies and get you on a webinar series already. I think that's
not a problem. Not a problem.
We'll have to get you going.
Love to tell you about some of the things that we found, and it's really
what you say, that packing with the upright and the low foot. What's the packing? What have you done there? What actually have you done? That is something we see all the time. I might just.
Well, when you get asymmetric feet, again, we've always concentrated on the hoof capsule, haven't we? Well, of course, it's because of the differential in pressure between the two through the two hooves that creates one heel and then one negative palmar aspect. But that comes about because of the posture And you can hypothesize whether the one limb is longer than the other one, because some people don't think that limb length disparity exists. You can say, well, it may come about because the one shoulder is a different angle, and then the reciprocal distance of the lever arm is changed. But what you find is that the broken back hoof that is negative in the heel is further forward than the upright one. Hence the reason why you don't get you get more pressure in the heel of the longer limb, and you get less pressure in the heel of the shorter limb, so it grows the heel. What happens then, and let's look at your dressage horse as a classic example, is that you then have a different position of these limbs relative to the body. So when that means that the position of which they leave the ground is different. So the upright limb, the carpal flexion, the knee flexion, you will be more exaggerated because it will snap into the swing phase a lot quicker. So you'll get more knee action. You'll get transition problems. You'll get extensions where you'll get one will be higher than the other one. What can we do about it? Well, you can do things through shoeing, but one of the most revolutionary things that I found is that I stumbled across it one day when we were doing some gait analysis. So we were able to put some statistical value to what we were seeing. And we had a Grand Prix dressage horse that was selected for the team that had asymmetric front feet. We took the measurements, so we were able to grade that horse then and say it is asymmetric from its left to its right by X. And I said, I'm just going to do something. I said, I want to show this. Took the horse out to the arena. I got some polyurethane pouring, packed the upright foot, didn't take the shoe off, just poured it in, let it go off, took it back in again. The horse was completely symmetrical afterwards. So what's changed? Well, the only thing that's changed, because you haven't elevated the foot, but what you've done is you've changed the interaction of this foot in relation to the surface. So you, in effect, you've ballooned the foot on top of the surface, stop any sinking at all, which means that the horse is then more symmetrical. And I use it so often. It is so simple, and I use it so often. And only, again, I was on a yard and somebody said, can you just have a look at this? And I said, well, that's your problem. Somebody
So
else.
you're dealing with the upright foot or the collapsed foot?
The upright foot. So you pack the upright foot, and by packing the upright foot, you then balloon that foot on top of the surface. You stop any sinkage at all. By ballooning it on top of the surface, it means that when the weight comes over it, you don't sink quite so much, even on surfaces, synthetic surfaces that don't appear to be that deep. It doesn't sink. It stays on top of the surface. The other one, you get the weight then compresses into the surface, which means that the longer limb becomes shorter, if you follow me.
Yeah.
And the shorter limb, because it's on top of the surface, becomes longer. And it means that from a lever position, the horse is far more symmetrical in front. Works a treat.
Wow. There you go. That's
I
think there'd be a few. That's eye-opening. There'd be a few clients getting a phone call today.
But that's the beauty of it. And this poor lady, I was on a yard, and this a very, very good rider, and she said, "Oh, Haydn, can you just have a look at this for me? Because I think the balance is out, and can you have a word with my farrier and everything else?" And I said, "Your farrier's not doing anything wrong. The farrier is," I said, "it's your horse." And we actually, the other thing to do with these horses is if you put them on a circle. If you put them on a lunge and you put the shorter one, the upright foot on the inside, these horses will appear to be quite comfortable. You then change the rein and put the shorter limb on the outside. That is when you see them and you go, the horse is not comfortable. It is not symmetrical. It's uneven. And this was a stallion, a Grand Prix. And that's all I'd done is I said, that's fine. I said, look, this is what we'll do. And we just poured some polyurethane in. We took the horse back into the arena, put it on a circle, and it was absolutely fine. So there you go.
Wow.
Simple
Simple
like
is always
me.
best. Yeah. Well, no, I think it was over the years. I've had different clients. One client springs to mind, and it was the KISS principle: keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
And I think, I
Pack
think it's
pack
amazing.
it right up to the so pack it so that it is full right up to the thickness of the shoe. So you have a complete flat platform and try it. And for everyone that works, a bit of a deal. For everyone that works, you've got to send me a beer.
I'll be sending you more in a beer. I'll be sending more in a beer after this talk. To be honest, it's priceless. To be honest, some of the stuff and that's where I think if there's anything good to come out of COVID, and I don't think there's a lot. I think the one thing I have seen is online education and people willing to step outside that traditional lecture theatre and actually communicate via the internet. I think that's the one biggest thing that will come out of whole COVID. I'm amazed.
I completely agree. Yeah.
I think I'm amazed even in the last 6 weeks, the number of different practitioners I've had a chance to either talk to, listen to, even myself, to be honest. I've been talking about webinars for 2 years.
Yeah.
And well, COVID kicked in, everyone was locked in. And I said, well, they'll be getting bored of Netflix. Now's the time. What else are you going to do? They'll be bored of Netflix. They can't run away. They haven't got an excuse for not to turn up. So it is, and it's one of those things. But that's fabulous. Thank you, Hayden, so much. It really has been a pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure. It really is.
It's great to talk to. It makes me feel a little bit less homesick, talking to a Welshman.
There you go. Yeah.
We've
got to stick together. We got to stick together.
Got to stick together because no one else will stick up for us. So that's great. But look, thank you very much again, Hayden, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yes, and stay safe, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Same to you, Sue. Thanks, Hayden. Cheers.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye now.